I've chosen to do my term paper on the morality of capitalism. There are a lot of sophisticated and unsophisticated arguments that could be made for either side, whether or not it's moral or immoral. And my goal here is not to determine whether or not capitalism has good or bad effects, but whether or not capitalism in and of itself is a moral or immoral way of producing commodities, goods. So we will start, of course, with some more arguments in favor of capitalism, and I guess kind of a natural progression that I would like to do would be kind of from the more commonplace arguments you get to the more sophisticated arguments you'd get, for and against. So I'll start with the arguments for why capitalism is a moral, we'll call it socio-economic system. So the first argument that we hear very often, in these arguments, is that greed is a part of human nature, and that in a capitalistic society, this greed more or less works to the advantage of the whole. That in laissez-faire, well, I guess I should have mentioned that we're going to be focusing mainly here on laissez-faire capitalism, which is unregulated free market capitalism. So, with basically little to no government regulation. I should have stated that in the beginning. I apologize. So, back to the greed aspect. That greed is a part of human nature, and that capitalism works well with this characteristic. It fits this the scheme of mankind. We are these intrinsically greedy characters, and the way capitalism works, of course, is that you have private ownership of land, property, goods, things like that, and that with that land you are then free to create a business, right? So whether it's making shirts, things like that, whatever the commodity may be, you produce them for your own profit, right? And so with that, you're able to make money from it, right? So you're accomplishing the goal of your own self-interest. You're taking care of yourself first, and then with the money that you make from that, you're able to pay the workers, right? And so the idea here is that the more inequality there is, the more greedy somebody is, the more money they can make, which means the more goods they can produce for society. Now, if you have just one person doing that, obviously that's some kind of dictatorship or something like that. But if then the idea is that if you have free market capitalism, laissez-faire, which is the citizens are able to own this private property and produce the goods. And if you have a system in which you assume that everybody is greedy, then you will have an overflow of goods, and the overflow of goods will produce competition, will produce higher wages because one company will undercut, or it's not undercut, but offer more money to an employee, slightly, of course, to get them to work for their company so that they can make more money and continue having business. Right. So as far as the greed argument goes, which I think is seriously flawed at a few different levels, but we'll get onto that in the against capitalism side of the argument. Okay. So now another argument you'll hear for capitalism, for the morality of it, is that capitalism is the only system that has created true freedom, right? And opposed to, communism, socialism, feudalism, dictatorships, things like that. This has been the true bringing of freedom to humanity, all right? Milton Friedman's argument is that wherever capitalism has gone, it has succeeded. It has raised standard of living. It has brought ingenuity into whatever field it places itself into. Another one of Friedman's arguments for it and he'll say this himself, or he did when he's deceased, is that capitalism is not sufficient for freedom, but capitalism is necessary for freedom. Okay, and so what he means by this is that capitalism alone cannot produce this freedom. It has to work in conjunction with the people, and but it is necessary. Wherever freedom has been, wherever people have been free, capitalism has been there. So, okay. And then we'll hear from Thomas Sowell. Another argument is that it is the inequality that creates freedom. So you take an example of two people. You take Albert Einstein. We'll use an easy one. Albert Einstein and I don't know, Michael Jordan. Okay, so obviously they're not equal, right? Albert Einstein is a physicist. He's an extraordinary physicist, and Michael Jordan is an extraordinary athlete. Now they're not equals. Now Thomas Sowell's argument, which is a bit more sophisticated than the greed argument, in my opinion, says that if we had a system in place that tried to check those people and force them to be equal, there would be a significant reduction of freedom. So a big part of the for capitalism side comes in with this inequality argument. That inequality is good. Inequality is good, and you can tie that into the greed argument if you'd like. You know, who's on top. You know, if you say that capitalism kind of highlights greed, then you'll create this kind of dichotomy where you only basically have two classes. That's kind of what's happening now. You have the capitalist, who is in charge of means of production, and you'll have the worker. So that's kind of Thomas Sowell's argument, that the inequality creates equality and freedom. Okay. So another argument you'll hear from a pro-capitalist would be that capitalism creates economic freedom, which is, I suppose, according to them, the ultimate freedom. Okay, and this also ties into the last argument I made, where the inequality creates the freedom. Economic freedom, citizens are free to pursue their own endeavors for their own self-interest, for their own profit making. And what's different about this argument is he says this is not a zero-sum game, meaning that if somebody wins, somebody has to lose. That's not necessarily how it is. He'll say that, or anybody that argues this point would tell you that just because somebody is benefiting from any kind of transaction does not mean that other people have to lose. And in that he means that a capitalist who, say, a multi-million-dollar corporation, they're a multi-million-dollar corporation. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of power. They create a lot of goods. And then the idea they're trying to kind of destroy here is that somebody has to be on the other end of that. Somebody has to be, completely poor. There has to be a kind of this polar opposite thing happening. This is the argument that they're trying to destroy. And so they tell you, no, that's not true, because of this extreme inequality economically. That those corporations making a lot of money and producing goods will be able to, with competition, of course, this is free market, lower prices for the workers, and in creating all that money, creating all that profit, they'll be able to pay their workers, and through the competition of their organization competing with other organizations, that they'll be able to lower the prices of goods. So not only are you giving workers enough money to purchase the products that they're creating, but also lowering the prices for the same workers. So this is the argument that it is not a zero-sum game, that there is benefit happening at every level. Maybe more on one side than the other, but no less, it is not a zero-sum. Everybody's benefiting from it. So those are the arguments, those are the common arguments for capitalism, and I will now continue to give the moral arguments against capitalism.